So here we go. Two right-wing commentators on Talk TV, both absolutely furious about a party that exists to destroy Nigel Farage.
They seem to exist to try and destroy Farage, and that's it. And whether you love him or loathe him, right, I don't think that is politically constructive. I think that is actually doing the bidding of the sort of deep state and the establishment, who would love to see there not being a right-wing government in the United Kingdom.
And, well, here's the thing. They're not wrong. And the people who actually built it are watching from a very comfortable distance. To understand why this matters, we need to understand what the right-wing vote actually looks like right now. Alex Phillips, the host of the show and Farage loyalist, pretending to be a neutral analyst, made a point of this herself.
Back when you had UKIP 1.0 under the leadership of Nigel Farage, so we're talking about a decade, just over a decade ago, you could tell the difference between UKIP, Nigel Farage, and Conservatives and David Cameron. What you couldn't tell the difference between, frankly, was the Conservative Party under Cameron and the Labour Party. And so there was this huge diversity on the right wing of politics. Frankly, now, if you look at the rhetoric, the policies, the ideology, the convictions, the promises, whatever you want to call it, of Kemi Badenoch, of the emergent Rupert Lowe, of Reform UK, they're pretty much identical. You know, they have adopted, essentially, what Nigel Farage's position has been for the longest time.
And she's right. A decade ago, Farage had a monopoly on that particular kind of right-wing politics. The Conservatives were occupying a different ground. Now, Badenoch and Reform are fighting over exactly the same patch: immigration, sovereignty, small state. Which means that every vote Restore takes from Reform is a vote from an already crowded battlefield. The damage is concentrated, and that's before you even consider who built Restore in the first place. Now, Restore launched on the 30th of June 2025, led by Rupert Lowe, the former Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. He was suspended by Reform in March of 2025 after allegedly threatening party chairman Zia Youssef. The CPS later found insufficient evidence to prosecute. Lowe says the whole thing was a stitch-up because he dared to criticise Farage. What's notable is that Restore launched on the exact same day as Advanced UK, another splinter, this one led by Ben Habib, the guy in the middle there, another ex-Reform figure. Two operations, same day, both positioning themselves as the more serious than the party that they've just left. And that's quite a coincidence. Restore stated a mission that is fundamentally change the way Britain is governed. Their actual mission, if you watch what they actually do rather than what they say, is somewhere narrower than that. When Restore launched as a pressure group before it came, a formal party, it was an advisory board, and it included Susan Hall, the then leader of the Conservative Party group on the London Assembly. Gavin Williamson, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, also joined the board. The $600,000 crowdfunding campaign for a grooming gang inquiry attracted the active involvement of Conservative MPs Nick Timothy and Esther McVeigh. This is not an advisory board of grassroots movements. This is a Conservative reunion with a different name on the door. But it goes further than names on a board. In May of 2025, a month before Restore even officially launched, Rupert Lowe had a private lunch with Robert Jenrick at 5 Hereford Street in Mayfair's members club that exists specifically so powerful people can have conversations they'd rather not have in public. The pair discussed Lowe's political future, and here is where it does get really interesting, because Ben Habib, on that same talk show, let something slip about Jenrick's connection that he clearly hadn't fully thought through.
Because at one point Rupert Lowe was invited to come and be the leader of Advance UK when you set up that political party, but he said he didn't want to.
He accepted the position and then changed his mind.
Why do you think he changed his mind?
It was in mid-June last year, 2025, he decided that he wanted to do a movement, not a political party.
Is this sort of mid-June when he was meeting with the Conservatives, do you think?
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I can say unequivocally that what triggered, I think, Rupert Lowe into launching Restore Britain was Jenrick leaving the Conservatives and joining Reform.
He doesn't know what happened behind the scenes, but the timeline speaks for itself. Mid-June of 2025, Jenrick is meeting with Lowe privately. A month later, Restore Britain launches with the Conservative stacked advisory board. Afterwards, Jenrick told journalists that on the question of Lowe joining Tories, all options are open. Alex Burkhardt, another senior Conservative, was also asked the same question, and his response, well, it's not a no. Then in October of 2025, the Conservative Party did something really quite unusual. They gave Rupert Lowe, a man who was not a Conservative MP, never had been a Conservative MP, and was sitting as an independent, one of their allocated seats on the Public Accounts Committee, a seat they've effectively owned, handed to someone else. They said it was because he shared their values of cutting waste. A former Conservative special advisor was more honest about it, telling The Spectator that the Tory party has every interest in keeping the concept of Restore as alive as possible. And so there it is, in plain English, from somebody who knows. Which brings us back to Phillips making her structural argument, the one she frames as a principle concern for the right, which is an actually barefaced concealed panic about what happens to Farage's vote share.
But what I would say is this: in 2019, when the Brexit Party stood down all the candidates, something that you and I disapproved of because it was disenfranchising people, it was very easy for people to say, well, I'm not going to vote the Brexit Party, I will vote the Conservative Party instead. Now, the difficulty we have with this entity is its focus is on attacking and destroying reform, OK? To the extent that if Restore Party can't get a whole slate of candidates in a snap general election, they have poisoned people against voting for anything else on the right.
If Restore can't field a full slate in a snap general election, she's saying that they've spent months turning people against reform without giving those voters anywhere else to go. A party that exists to destroy one man is not a political movement, it's a controlled demolition. I mean, it's a sharp argument, and it's completely correct. It's also being made by someone whose primary interest is protecting Farage and not analysing the British political landscape. But the structural point still stands regardless of who's making it. The Spectator put it even more cleanly. Reform are now using the exact language about Restore that the Tory party used to use about reform like 18 months ago. Farage spent years fragmenting the Conservative vote, bleeding their support and forcing them to chase his positions on immigration and Brexit. Now someone is doing it to him, and he doesn't like it. And the Conservatives, the people he spent a decade tormenting, are now watching with what one MP is calling an admirable restraint. But here's what makes the story way more complicated than a simple "the Tories built a hit squad." When Restore officially became a registered political party in February of 2026, Susan Hall and Gavin Williamson quietly left the advisory board. The senior Conservatives who had been happy to associate with Restore as a pressure group, a movement like a campaign or, just a vibe, feelings, that sort of thing, wanted nothing to do with it once it started competing for actual votes. They lit the match and then they walked away before the fire spread to them. That's not like a dark conspiracy or anything like that. That is something almost kind of more cynical. Opportunism masquerading as principle. The Tories saw a useful tool for destabilising reform, lent it credibility and committee seats and names on a letterhead, and then retreated to a safe distance the moment it became, electorally inconvenient. Meanwhile, Restore has continued to attract a rather different crowd. Hope Not Hate described the party as having instantly filled the gap of the right of reform that dozens of micro-parties have been clawing at for years. Neo-fascist leaders publicly backed it. Prominent eco-nationalists urged their supporters to join as candidates and organisers. Lowe's response was this, essentially, indifference. So what you actually have is a party that the Conservative establishment incubated, used and quietly abandoned, which then filled up with the people considerably further right than anything the Tory grandees had in mind. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you light a fire without checking what's downwind.
But Reform's Achilles heel right now is this £5 million that was donated, gifted, whatever, to Farage. And that is going through a Parliamentary Standard Commissioner's assessment. It'll then, if the Commissioner thinks it's serious, and remember, the Commissioner is also adjudicating 17 failures by Farage to declare 380,000 quid, private jet flights and other things. So it's looking quite precarious for Farage from a parliamentary standards perspective. And if that forces a by-election, I'm afraid that is an own goal by Reform.
Farage had always prided himself on being able to see off threats from his flanks. He spent 20 years doing it to the Tories. He's now on the receiving end of the same operation, backed by some of the same people he spent 20 years outwitting. Whether Restore ultimately damages Reform at the ballot box remains to be seen, but the story of how it got here, privately launched into existence in Mayfair, given a committee seat by the party it was supposed to be opposing, and then quietly disowned when it became too inconvenient, tells you everything you need to know about how the British right actually operates when nobody's watching. It's not ideology, it's never ideology, it's just who gets to hold the matches.